Good afternoon. You know, Maya Angelou once said, we must all know that a diversity makes for a strong tapestry. And we must all understand that each thread of the tapestry is of equal value, without a doubt. So today, we've talked a lot about diversity and getting to equality for humanity. And so this talk this evening is actually a very big privilege because tonight we're going to meet two presidents from minorities for the first time that are presidents on large medical organizations. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to get this started. And I'm really exciting because we're going to get this session on advancing medicine through diverse leadership and introduce our speakers tonight. But first, let me tell you a little bit about them. I'm proud to be joined by Dr. Tochi Iroku-Malize, the president of the American Academy of Family Physicians. Doctor is also the senior vice president of family medicine at Northwell Health and the chair of family medicine for the Donald and Barbara Zucker School of Medicine at Hofstra Northwell. We will also be joined by our own Dr. David Park, our newly installed ACOFP president, who is also the vice president and founding dean of the new Rocky Vista University, Montana College of Osteopathic Medicine. We're going to be discussing the existing disparities around the number of minority leaders in the House of Medicine. And we'll evaluate how we define minority and related unspoken challenges, as well as discover the value of addressing biases in medicine as it relates to leadership. We're going to be, it's informal. It's like pretend you're in the ACOFP Disney World living room. So doctors, I'd like to invite you up here both today. And so we can get started in talking about this. We're going to have some informal questions and answers, of our leaders and their opinions and, things that they went through to get where they are today. You never know where our paths are going to go, right, when they start. So doctors, welcome. Come on up.
Thank you.
Doctor, thank you.
Yes.
Well, thank you both for being here today. Appreciate it. It's great to see you both. And so I have some questions for you that I have on my handy-dandy sheet, which I've been really good about trying to protect from all the spills and everything that we went through during the program today. So what we're going to do is we're going to get started, and we're going to ask each of the doctors some questions and see the path and the journey that they went through. And so I have a first question that we're going to start off with you, doctor, okay? And what I'd like to know is, could you tell us about your background and the path you took to get where you are now?
So my path, very long. So we only have a few minutes, so there's a timer. I'm the child of immigrants, and my father was a surgeon, my mom was a nurse, midwife, and a nurse practitioner, and born in Brooklyn, and went that path. But it was expected, like most children of immigrants, to be the doctor, lawyer, and engineer, right? So that was kind of the environment in which I grew up. But fast forward, my journey to where I am today is a parallel journey, right? So it's really that I had, as I was going through med school residency, as I was, I became chief resident, just being that person. And when I was graduating, I remember saying to the medical chief of staff, when he asked me, what are you going to do upon graduating from residency? I said, listen, I'm going to see the world. I'm going to save the planet. I'm going to be doing international medicine. See ya. And he's like, wait. Can you just hang out, and just help me start what was new, which was hospital medicine? Can you help us start a hospital medicine program? And I was like, no. And then I said, okay, fine. 1 year. So mind you, I've been there for 23 years now. So, okay. But, went up that path, became program director, director of the hospitalist program, associate program director of the residency program, I know you're a program director. I call myself a recovering program director. And then eventually, when they were starting up a medical school, I said, okay, fine, let me help them. They knew about my curricular work. They asked me if I would be part of that. And then I said, sure, help them create that medical school, and fought for Department of Family Medicine because they weren't going to have one. And so that was another conversation. So that's my pathway. That was one pathway through the organization in which I worked. Meanwhile, as a resident, as a first-year resident, and that's a shout out to all the residents out there, and also all the you program directors that have your residents come out here. My program director on my very first day said, sign this piece of paper. He told all of us to sign the paper. I'm like, what's this? And that was to belong to the AAFP, the American Academy of Family Physicians. Had no clue what it was. He said, yeah, you're doing it. And we said, fine. We became members. And then he said, you're going off to New York State Academy to be a resident rep, and you're also going to the American Academy of Family Physicians to work as a resident rep as well. And so that's how that career continued. So resident rep, eventually new physician on the board, eventually became president of New York State Academy of Family Physicians, was on a lot of commissions for the American Academy, and then eventually ran for the board, and then ran for president. So that was two parallel tracks that I did that got me to where I am today. And it was all because each time as people asked me or as I moved forward, I said, yeah, sure, I'll do it.
You took whatever opportunity you could.
Absolutely.
On your path.
Yep.
And thank you. And Dr. Park, well, not only have you started one medical school, but two. So tell me, when you were a little boy, what's your journey like?
Well, I was born in Seoul, South Korea. And I always start with that when I introduce myself, because it just gets the curiosity out of the way. Is he Chinese, Vietnamese, Japanese? So I always start, born in Seoul, South Korea. Came to this country when I was 4, and a very similar story. My parents were immigrants. My mother was an RN in Korea, but for various reasons, never actually ended up working here in America. But yes, similar to that culture, doctor, lawyer, engineer, but in my family, it was just doctor. And you know, growing up in New York City most of my life, and that's kind of how we've connected.
That is exactly how we connected. The moment I found out he was a New Yorker, I was like, ah, yes.
Automatic connection.
And they work out together, by the way, early in the morning.
We travel
Not too early.
together.
Depends. And I don't do treadmill, so, but anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
And very similar. I just did what I did. I worked hard. I always enjoyed mentoring and teaching others. It's the Korean culture. It's you're the big brother, and then you take care of the people that come after you. So I did that during, college and medical school and residency, and I got noticed by the residency program director, and I stayed on as faculty for 4 years, and that kind of led me into the journey of academic medicine. They asked me, and I said, okay. And in the ACOFP, you should be on a committee. Okay. You should go on the board. No, I'm not ready yet. Next year, you should go on the board. Okay. And it was just a matter of saying yes to opportunities that led me to where I am today.
I mean, did you ever think, either one of you, was this ever a part of your dream or your role modeling, since you both are the first to ever be this way, presidents? You never really had any role models like this.
Yeah, well, actually, there was one. Warren Jones was the first black president of the American Academy of Family Physicians. And I remember as a resident walking up to him and asking him, do you think I could join the board? And he's like, absolutely, absolutely. But what he didn't know was I was talking about the New York State board. He was like, absolutely, the national board wants you. They need people like you. And I was like, oh, no, not national. I'm talking about New York State. He's like, oh, New York, go to New York. When you're done with New York, come back to national. And so, yeah, so I did have him. That wasn't, but I didn't plan on or dream of being president of the organization. I just wanted to be involved. And so looking at someone that looked like me helped me to say, okay, there's a chance for me to be involved, that I'll be accepted here.
I think it's a big point. So where I practice in Kensington, one of the lowest life expectancy in the country, and what you said is sometimes the students say, there's no one who looks like me, so they don't even have that dream.
Right.
How about you, Dr. Park?
In the ACOFP, there was no one that looked like me. As a matter of fact, I'm the first president of the ACOFP of ethnic minority. And I think this was a special event where, because it's the first time in the history of our two organizations, the two largest family medicine organizations, that we have minority presidents. But although I didn't have a role model that looked like me, I had other role models in the organization, and I don't really think they saw color or my minority. And so I got mentored regardless, so I looked up to various other people that got me where I am today. And especially in ACOP, before we even started the strategic plan of doing focused DEI work, I think we were all, especially family medicine, and perhaps particularly more in osteopathic family medicine, that we were always inclusive and embracive of all people.
Thank you. Now, I have another question. You ready?
Sure.
Here we go. What challenges did you face in your leadership journey as a minority, and how did you overcome them?
So it's interesting. So Dr. Park mentioned, the mentors, the people that he looked up to. So all of you remember, for those of you who were here yesterday, when he was talking about the legacy coin, and he had that one person that he saw that came up and said that you can do this, and then that person influenced another individual who came up, eventually became president, and said, hey, you can do this. And that led to him, and yesterday he now brought out the coin and said, hey, you can do this. So that's kind of looking up to someone and having a mentor. I had a mentor, my first mentor would have been Dr. Bonanno, Richard Bonanno. I say his name everywhere I go, Italian-American. He was my program director. He's the one that got me started on this journey. He believed in me, young black girl, still believed in me, and he said, hey, picked me up, said, go lead. And so that helped. However, I've had some people who were supposed to be mentors who didn't see me as someone who should lead. I once walked into an office upon graduating. I was running, just about to started up the hospitalist program. And I was wondering why I kept getting passed over for roles. And I spoke to the person in charge, and I said, where do you see me? Where do you see my future? And he said to me, you? Oh, easy. I see you working part-time and raising your children. I was like, okay. You would think that he knew me since I was a resident. He knew I was the one that led the boycott against an attending who was doing the bad thing. So, but that was one of the things. And there are some people who gave me advice that would have, in fact, he's the one that told me when I wanted to I was working as associate program director, and I was running the hospitalist program, making one salary, one set of benefits, saving the system a lot of money. And I said, I need a raise, and I wanted a certain amount, and he said, no, don't ask for too much. And he told me to lower what I wanted, and I had to, thought about it, and I said, okay, thank you, and I went home and I said, no, that's silly. I'm going to know my worth, and I asked for way more than I wanted, saying that if they cut it down, they'd cut it down to what I needed. And they gave me exactly what I asked for, and I was like, I should have asked for more, But that's some of the barriers, So you have to think about that. Just watching, some people don't see you for what you can do. They don't keep you in mind. Whereas my colleague, who wasn't really interested in doing stuff, was always getting promoted, and we were close friends. Mm-hmm. And she was like, yeah, I don't know why they keep asking me to take these positions, So that was part of the barrier, just not being seen or seen as a potential leader in the space in which I was.
And you mentioned those coins, which I gave out at the Congress of Delegates yesterday. But for those of you in the audience that are here that didn't get a coin, you'll have an opportunity to get one and hear the story at the presidential reception on Saturday night. And
I took two.
Well, Doctor, what about your challenges, and how did you overcome them? And did you ever see yourself being here,
My challenge growing up here, coming here in the 70s, even though Queens is probably now the most diverse county in the world, back then there were 2 Asian kids in the school. And I got picked on a lot, I got bullied a lot, and my dad put me in Taekwondo, so I learned how to defend myself, so I got into fights and I learned how to defend myself. But I was different from the other kids because after they go home, they do their homework and they're about done. But starting in elementary school, since my parents could barely speak English, I was doing a lot of translations for them, reading letters about bills and talking to the landlord on the phone. So I had like extra homework to do to support them. So I felt that wasn't fair, but you do what you do to support the family and help. And then through leadership, though, there's that minority, that model minority myth that exists for the Asian Americans, and that is hardworking, smart, good at math, and I was not very good at math, and just putting your head down, tolerating things, and just not complaining. And there are cultural things like when someone's talking to you, when a person of authority is talking to you, you don't look them in the eye out of a sign of respect. And you're in a submissive type position like this to respect your elders. Well, that can be seen by people in American culture as not engaged, not confident, and just being timid. So I learned in college that I better learn how to act like an American. I'm Asian American, so let me act like an American and acculturate and behave like an American. If I'm going to succeed in this country, I'm going to learn how to succeed with the majority culture. So now, while I didn't give up my culture, I've adapted. And so the things that I've done was be more vocal. I stood up for myself, not with fists and legs anymore, but with my voice. And I spoke what I wanted to say, and I spoke up. And I think maybe that's how I got noticed in the ACOFP, because when I was in the Congress of Delegates, like many of the people that are doing now, they come up to the microphone and make motions and make amendments and talk for or against motions. And when I read those things and did my homework, I had thoughts. So I went up and I spoke. So when I see others doing that in Congress, I am reminded of myself, and I'm applauding them for having the bravery to go up there. So really being confident and vocal, and just accepting that you're an American, you're in America, so let me act American.
So basically, it's something that it's equal opportunity, that you deserve it, you should be able to get it. It's not, it's not one of these things, oh, they'll never pick me, or I can never because of who I am, but basically it's believing in yourself, right?
Right. I was asked a year and a half ago to give a talk about how I, as a dean of a medical school and being on the board of a national organization, how I broke through the bamboo ceiling. That was the ask, to talk about how I broke through the bamboo ceiling. And I looked up that term, and I didn't like that term because it's a little racist, I think, but I found out that it was coined by a Korean woman who wrote this book. But it's basically the Asian glass ceiling. And if the question was how I broke through the glass ceiling, well, I chose not to see it.
Yeah.
And just kept on doing what I wanted to do without thinking that there were going to be barriers. And you know what? There's always barriers. We've all been through these barriers. You break through it, you step over it, you go around it. That's just life.
Thank you. Thank you. Question. What does it mean to you to be a minority in a leadership role in a national organization? What is the meaning? Is it a sense of pride? Is it just something that you can be a shining light for others to follow you? What does it mean?
So, first of all, it's awesome. So everybody should, try to, if you're so moved to go into leadership, it's awesome. I like that part of it. But there's also a burden, because now it seems that whatever I do, I sometimes worry that they're going to say, okay, now she's representing all the black women or all the black people. If I make a mistake, it's not that the president of the American Academy of Family Physicians made a mistake. It's that, yeah, see, that's what happens when you put a black woman in power, that type of thing. So you think about that. Then you also think about those who are coming behind you, that extra burden, because you really want to do well. And even if you're really tired, you have to remain positive, because at the end of the day, if Warren Jones wasn't positive when I was a resident, I may not have continued on my pathway. And I've had a resident come up to me who said to me, I saw you as a student give a talk. And I said, young black male, and said, and when I saw you, I said, okay, I'm going to do family medicine and I'm going to be like her. And I'll tell you right now, he's a PGY3. He's now the resident delegate for the American Academy of Family Physicians. and he's going on to do FMOB. So, a big shout out to him, but I thought to myself, wow, you never know who you're impacting. So the pride is there for getting to that position, but then that responsibility that you have, because you need to do really well, serve the people that you're meant to serve. That as a leader, you're serving everyone, regardless of whether they look like you or not. That's the whole point of us being here, serving our community, serving our peers, serving the families that we have. But then also thinking about those people that look like us, that are looking up to us and saying, so it's not just the women, of course. I mean, the number of young women I speak to that say to me, wait a minute, you are a leader, then you do this and you do that, and I have 3 kids, and I was a dance mom, and I was a soccer mom too. I did it all, and I'll tell you all about that in another talk. But but it's true. I was that mom that was embarrassed my kids at the front of the stage with the pom poms, color coordinated. But I know that they're looking at me and saying, okay, if she can do it, okay, maybe I can too. And so that's part of that responsibility. And I'm sure a lot of leaders have that, but when you're in a group that may have a little bit more of a challenge to getting to leadership, then you have to really stay on point a lot of the times. So do your job, do the best you can, enjoy the process of being there to help lead others to be the best they can be, but then also be mindful of those who are looking up to you and thinking about you're the person that they're looking to say, okay, this is my guiding star as to where I can be in the future.
Thank you. So doctor, you mentioned your family, right? So what does it mean to you to be a leader and a minority leader? I mean, you mentioned your family and the heritage and the expectations and everything like that. Was there an extra burden or an extra pride or extra barrier? What does it mean to you?
I think it means a lot to other Asian Americans who see me in this role. I mean, I get emails and texts and other people coming up to me and saying, wow, I'm so glad that an Asian American is in the presidency position here, or you're involved. Wow, you're a dean. As an Asian American, you inspire us. And you're right, now it gives other people that are of my ethnic background or from Asia the opportunity to say it can be done. So it's validation, it's proof that it can be done. But what's interesting is that we're far from where we're supposed to be, especially when it comes to leadership. Yeah. And that's kind of the purpose of this talk, is we don't have enough diversity in leadership. And you're right, I feel the same burden. I don't represent all the Asian. There are 4.6 billion Asians in the world, making up 60% of the global population. And in America though, we're minorities, only 7%. Right, 22 million, 7%. But if you look at all the top leaders of corporations and organizations and businesses, only 3% of Asian Americans make up that top leadership. And that also translates to medical school. There's about 200 medical schools, and there's only about a handful of Asian deans, including the osteopathic world here. But and while Asians are considered not underrepresented in medicine, perhaps overrepresented in medicine, because about 25% of allopathic and osteopathic medical students are Asian American. 25% of our students are Asian American. But same to that 3% number, about 3% of the deans are Asian American. Wow. So it means a lot that I can represent, that I can inspire, and so that others can follow. But I think we're getting there. We're slowly getting there.
Both of you. I talked to Doctor about his family. What about your family?
So, my mom is overjoyed. My dad was, and you guys saw, my mother is an overachiever, so I think that's where I get it from, because you saw the number of degrees I have. My mom has a similar number. She's got a PhD from Columbia. She just crazy, and always worked 2 jobs, even when she didn't need to. But she's overjoyed. She's brimming with pride. My father unfortunately passed away a few years ago, but he has always, fathers and daughters, he was proud of me, and even if I chewed bubble gum, he'd be like, oh, see my daughter, she's so awesome, so he was proud all the time. But I knew that, Yeah, so this is good. And each thing that I do, now we move to the point where the mothers usually say, and I think all immigrant moms are the same. It's like, okay, oh, you're so good, you're so good. Oh, don't work too hard. Please stop. Where are you going next? Florida? Oh, don't let them work you too hard. You know, so that type of thing. But very proud to tell her friends, my daughter's going to be talking at that conference in Orlando. So, you know, so very proud, very, very, very proud. And so that's good. And again, I've inspired the rest of the family members. My mom is the oldest of 9 kids. So all her siblings have children, and all my cousins, they're like, okay, they've all actually followed similar footsteps in terms of becoming leaders in their respective fields. So,
and I had the pleasure of being at your inauguration at AAFP, and I saw your mother there. She came in traditional Nigerian garb, and for both of our immigrant parents, we achieved their American dream.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Oh, and you know what? So you mentioned that you were at Doctor's inauguration, but we also have another member of the ACOFP. Tell us, how did you end up joining the ACOFP?
So that is the funniest thing, right? I mean, so we're both members of each other's organizations. So he's he's my president, I'm his president. So that's that, and this is how it happened. Because when I became chair of family medicine for Northwell Health, I had an osteopathic program. And so that's at Plainview Hospital. So I had 3 allopathic, 1 osteopathic program, and I was like, wait a minute, I need to know what's going on with my osteopathic residents and my faculty, because I was heavily embedded in AAFP, but I knew nothing of ACOFP. And I knew I was getting people involved in advocacy work and leadership roles and things like that. So I was like, oh, I've got to find out what's going on with ACOFP. And I think way back in those days, I could become an associate. I think I was allowed to be an associate because I wasn't an osteopathic physician. So I joined. And then I scoured, that's what I would do. Whenever I wanted to learn about something, I would join the organization or sign up, and that's why I have so many degrees, because I just because it keeps me accountable. And so that's how I joined, because I wanted to make sure that my osteopathic residents and my faculty, that I had a pathway for them to make sure that I included that. So now I have 2 osteopathic programs, and this is every meeting, every executive meeting, because my executive board is made up of both osteopathic and allopathic docs and leaders for family medicine in my organization, we always discuss what's going on in AAFP, we discuss what's going on in the ACOFP all the time, at the New York State Academy, as well as the New York State chapter of ACOFP. So for me, that's very important that's part of being inclusive, right? You know, to make sure that I'm taking care of everyone. They're all part of my family, and so I've got to make sure that I offer them the best that can be. So I was stoked with the New Yorker student. I saw her somewhere. There you go. I was stoked when I saw her, you know, come up to the mic yesterday, and I was like, I've got to get more of my residents to this meeting. And so, that's how.
And then when I asked you, are you a member of ACOFP, I was hoping that you were going to say yes, but if you were going to say no, I was going to ask you to be a member. But when you told me that you were an associate member, I was happy, but then I realized I was a little sad because, you know, I told her, we now accept MDs as full membership,
members, right.
And boom, she did it. She's a full active member.
Full member, so yeah.
I mean, I think it's so awesome how both of you as leaders are just working together, right? Because it's all about the patients.
Yes.
And you're just uniting. And it has to do with diversity, equity, inclusion, right? Mm-hmm. And it takes both of you to do this. So it's just so wonderful. Now I have a little bit more serious question. Mm-hmm. Okay? What are your thoughts about the myriad of terms used to describe racial and ethnic differences that may confuse people? These different terms.
Yeah, so I think that it's ever evolving. The terminology is definitely ever evolving. How people identify, how they're perceived, how society. We know race is really a social term, right? It's not a real thing. It's just. I think about this when I said that I do global health, right? So I went to Kenya, and I was standing waiting for the car service that was supposed to pick me up, and I said to them, listen, whenever I'm at a taxi, I say the tall black woman in whatever color jacket I'm wearing. So I said the tall black woman with the yellow jacket, and waited. Evan on the phone with him, he said, I don't see you, I don't see you, I don't see you. Tall black woman, yellow jacket. kept driving. And finally I said, what's your license plate number? So I had to practically jump in front of his car. I said, it's me. And he looked at me, he said, but you said tall black woman. I said, yes. He said, Madame, you are not black. And so I was like, what? So in Kenya, I wasn't seen as black because I'm not dark enough to be black. So and I'm like, I said to him, psh, if you come back to the States, I'm absolutely black, so that's, but you see, it's a social construct, right? Race is a social construct. And so the terminology, that whole thing, we're forever learning, figuring it out. I'm trying to understand, how do you identify? I had a conversation yesterday about, how you see me. You don't know my full ethnic or cultural makeup, but the race you see is black. And does that really truly define me? I don't know. So, we've been having conversations about this as well. So,
right, because I was saying that Asian people, period, especially women, they are typically whiter than white people, right? But you don't call them white. Right? It's just so that it's all contextual. Exactly what you said.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and how do you address it? Like all the different terms that are used and the confusion. It's hard. Like someone's talking to you, do you correct them? When you're talking to your students, what do you do?
That is the hard part. You talked about, what challenges of the different terminologies, and boy, it was, years or decades. Black, do we say African American? What do we say? And now the Asians got into the fold, and we were just automatically considered yellow. Yellow was a very derogatory term when that term came out, right? Yellow peril, cowards, whatever it was. And I mentioned 4.6 billion people, right? 60% of the world. And if you just think about the Asian population, it's so large, right? You have the East Asians, China, Korea, Japan. You got the South Asians, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and they're not considered yellow, right? They're considered brown. That's how they go by. And then you got the Southeast, Filipino, Vietnamese, Cambodian, Thai, and then you got the Pacific Islanders, Hawaiian, Samoan, and the other Pacific Islanders. And they go by brown also. So to say that all Asian Americans are yellow is just, one, offensive. It could be for some people. And then two, it's just not accurate. So what is the right thing? So, what's interesting is that term, people of color. And we kind of fall into that. People just categorize us into places. So not a fan of that, but it happens.
Yeah. I mean, I think with time, first people will say, how do they identify? Again, I'm considered black here. I'm not black in Kenya. I think that the key thing is, how do you identify? Like, who are you? How do you identify what's your cultural makeup, and being open to that? It's going to take a while. It's not our generation. I think the next generation maybe will be better at this than we are, because we, unfortunately, I'm giving away my age, but Brady Bunch time, that was my TV show before remotes, and we learned it a different way. We're learning how to be different about it, and understanding that. What do you put the category that's not just purely black or African American, right? And then even African American, if you go to certain countries, I lived in Trinidad for a period of time. Even within that country, there are different colors and shades and caste system kind of thing going on, similar to like in India, So. It's going to take a while. We'll evolve and figure it out, but I think everybody needs to be open to it, and don't just be open to the fact that all of this, all the terminology is evolving, and we'll figure it out as we go and as people do research. But again, it's the individual. Ask that person, how do they identify? Don't assume, don't make assumptions, because you have no idea.
Right, because we are on this journey.
Right.
It's a DEI journey that we're on, and this time at ACOP we made a strategic plan, and we have a focused initiative in doing this, but you're right, we're going to figure it out. And so for the Asian Americans out there, if someone says yellow, or someone asks you what country you're from or where you're really from, perhaps not get so defensive and take that opportunity to educate, to educate. But one thing I do want to bring to light is to break a specific myth, the myth that perhaps racism and discrimination is not prevalent in Asian American communities because they're successful and they're doctors and they're doing this. If you disaggregate all the different ethnicities I just talked about in the Asian culture, there's a huge disparity in income, in jobs, in education, and various other things. A couple of years ago, there's this nonprofit organization called Launch. They did this survey, and they had found, of all the different minorities, Asian Americans were the #1 targeted with racial slurs and the butt of racial jokes, because a lot of people, I guess, tolerate that. And then recently, after the COVID thing, when I saw all the Asian hate that came out, that was very upsetting. And so that kind of really, I guess, kicked off my passion to help protect, to educate, and be a champion for DEI, for Asian Americans, as well as other people of diversity.
You know, we have students out there and residents and people new in their careers, and you know, you always want to be polite, but how do you address if someone addresses you wrong or says a slur? You know, do you just call them out on it? Say someone's, I mean, that's hard.
So
but you know, you got to say something, right?
So for residents and students, unfortunately, they're not in a position of authority. So they're always, that's an unfortunate piece, because they're worried that they're going to not pass their rotation, right? At the end of the day, the person who's probably making the slur is a senior resident or an attending, or someone else, right? Or the head nurse on the unit or something like that. So that makes it difficult for them. The key, though, is that's where you have to have that education for the allyship, so that those who are around them to help to say, no, just stop. I'll tell you something. I had one resident that was the subject of some racial slurs and things like that while doing a surgery rotation. And it was interesting because the one complaint they had wasn't about the surgeon. It was about the family medicine attending who was with them that didn't stop the surgeon, that didn't say, hey, that's inappropriate. Mm-hmm. So that's the part we need to do. I'm not going to lay this on the students and residents. It's not their job to educate attendings and others to do better, right?
This is why we all have to be allies.
That's why,
that's
right. So the key is
them.
everybody has to be there and be willing to step up and say something and say, you know what, that's not appropriate. I mean, there's sometimes you have these code words where you say, ouch. You know, that some people use that as ouch, and it's like, oh, what does that mean? It means that, you know,
yes.
You said something that was offensive, let's rein it in. But that's part of all of our jobs as leaders, everybody here, you know, as you're all, for those who are delegates and alternate delegates and other leaders and presidents of your chapters, and then anyone else who's involved in academia, your job is to help make that a safe space, to say, listen, hey, that's not okay, you know? Even just to stop it there, nip it in the bud so it doesn't continue, just say, oh, wait, hold on, I think that's, you know, a little too much. And then later on, talk to your colleague later, you know, and say, hey, we don't tolerate that. That's
right.
not
And there's
okay.
certain words that are said that are not meant to be in an offensive way, but they trigger us, right? I mean, there's definitely a word that we can't say to Black people.
She's articulate.
Right?
Because Black women shouldn't be. I should be talking like this, you know. I ain't got no, you know, whatever. So, but my mother was raised with the Queen's English, so I wasn't allowed to say ain't for the longest time until I went to school, and I learned that, and I was like, that's not a conjugate of anything. But anyway.
So I'll tell you, one of the things that slur that I grew up with by far the most was the word chink. And then I was chubby at one point when I was a kid, so when we called that chink a chunk. So they called me chunk for a while. It was kind of witty at the time, but nonetheless, it was offensive. So that word chink, when I hear that word, and people will say it very, very innocently, the chink in the armor. I get a visceral response to that that's just automatic, that I cannot control, right? And that is why we don't say the N-word. And that is why, please don't say the word chink. There's other ways to describe something. And so the question is, how do you stop something like that? Well, you can't, but you can help educate, because that's what we should all be doing. I had a senior leader who would frequently use the term, Chinese fire drill. Didn't mean anything by it, but so I had a conversation with him after a few times and asked him, that's kind of offensive to Chinese people, and most people think all Asians are Chinese. So he goes, I didn't realize it. So he intentionally tried to correct it, and he did. And he was very grateful that I told him that, because he would not have known.
Well, I think that's really important. Sometimes people don't realize what they're saying is offensive. They don't mean it. Do you both, as presidents, envision having a curriculum or something like that, like situations, and when someone says this, like, ouch, you know what I mean, where you can help inform us of situations that may occur and teach people how to react appropriately, and maybe in a room of others say, ouch, what do you mean by that? You know what I mean? Or help attendings or teachers be able to protect residents and students. Do you envision doing something like that together to help us?
I think from both sides, we already have that. That's already out there. People have done the research. They've done there are validated tools on how to make this happen. So it's just a matter of exposing everyone to it, to say, here, this is where you go, this is the link to it, and things like that. So that's available. Collaboration, well, this is how we begin our collaborations. I mean, our two organizations meet twice a year anyway, as part of the family of family medicine. To discuss where we're going, things that we have to do, policies, advocacy work that we have to do to better our specialty. So I think this is part of the conversation.
Right, and I'm sure in the past, our two organizations were considered rivals or enemies, perhaps. Right. But as we got to get to know each other, and I think it was Dr. Jeff Grove who actually, first tried to get us together and start the conversation, we realized, hey, we're a lot like each other. Hey, all of our policy agenda items are similar, pretty much the same, if not identical. Yep. Right? And we're all doing the same thing. And yes, we are intentionally doing DEI in medical school and residency and so forth. I did my residency a long time ago, and I was a part of this initial pilot project of teaching cultural competency. Yep. And there's some states that require cultural competency for licensure. So we're getting there, and a lot of the stuff that I talked about, chink, I asked my kids when they were living in Utah, has anyone ever called you chink? And they lived in Las Vegas for 10 years, and they're like, chink, what's that? So we're getting better, we're improving, things are changing, we're on the up and up, and now, we're shedding light on it, and it's maybe a lot for the older generation, because I think younger generations now are not necessarily targeted as much as perhaps when we were.
I thought that was really brave or very tactful when you said about that teacher associate about the fire drill. And 10 years ago, would you have had that bravery or confidence to go, that could be offensive?
I will tell you honestly, I did not have that bravery, and I had a certain boss who liked to joke around, and he made a lot of Asian jokes. And I was an employee, I was faculty, and I laughed along with him. I did. I didn't have the bravery. And it was not until way later when I realized, what if he told that joke in front of other Asian students, or they were the butt of the joke? Would I stand still? Would I just laugh? So then it became not okay. Thanks for asking that question.
And you too?
No, I was a terror. I'm sorry. I called, like I said, I'm the one that called for a meeting to have one of the attendings as a first year, saying that the attending was just verbally abusive to the residents. And I said this was unacceptable. And I called a meeting at one of our sessions and said the attending needs to be remediated or fired. And they remediated the attending. And she ended up working for me later on when I became program director. So it worked out okay. But she still tells the story. I'm a little bit more. I guess I am that person. I will fight for others. I guess maybe not for myself, but I will fight for others. And that sometimes is a flaw for women. That we fight for others. We will be that person and go to the bat for other people, but maybe I'm thinking if it was just only me, maybe I wouldn't have.
So isn't it interesting? You're brave for others,
but
not for
we're
yourself.
in the same generation, so if you remember in the 80s, racial jokes were the norm.
It was TV, are you kidding me?
Right, and you just go back and forth, and we just laughed at it, but now it will be you'll be canceled. You say something like that now. So we've come a long way.
You have. Both of you kind of bared your souls, told us a lot about personal stuff today. How you feel, how you got there. It's just really interesting to hear your journeys. Do you have any final closing thoughts or things that you'd like to share with everyone today?
So I want just to, for those of you who are out there who are thinking about being leaders, right? If it just even crossed your mind, and again, you don't have to be a leader of a national organization. You could be a leader in your town. You could join the school board. You could, I know some people are running for the school board. You can, be a leader in your religious institution. Just any, Girl Scouts, whatever, Boy Scouts, whatever organization it is, whatever it is you want to do. If you have a little bit of trepidation, don't worry. We all do. So just take that step and do it. If it's within your mission, if it's part of your reason for being, do it. A lot of people who end up being in leadership roles is because someone said, hey, I think you can do this. You try. If you succeed, great. If you don't, okay, but you've gotten the experience. So when I go around to tell others, I say, do what you can and move up to the next level if that's what you need to do, and keep moving, right? And as you're moving up, pull those who are behind you, bring them along for the journey. Don't forget that. Because when an opportunity opens and presents itself for you, and you're stuck here because you didn't bother to make sure you had a nice bench of people, new leaders to come up after you, it makes it more difficult for you to move to your next journey. So I want you all to think about that. Say yes when you can, but take care of yourself. I mean, I did my own physical issues and my own health issues that I had to contend with a few years ago. So take care of yourself, but at the same time, try to be a better person each day. Try to do better with your advocacy work, the things that you're doing here, and then live better as an individual. Live in your moment and live in your mission. And then as you're doing that, make sure you clear the way and bring others along with you.
Thank you. And Dr. Park? Thank you.
So I think you got to be true to yourself. I always, like I said, start off, I was born in South Korea, gets the curiosity out of the way, but that's part of my identity and my culture. So I'm a fusion, if you will, of Korean American or Asian American, but I don't represent all Asian Americans in this country or this world. But I do want to address, if I can, perhaps take some time to share some pearls. We talked about implicit bias. Everyone has implicit bias, we all do. So a few things perhaps. If an Asian person speaks fluent English, don't be, oh my gosh, you speak English so well. Kind of like we said, you're so articulate, right? Okay. And also, if someone speaks with a foreign accent, whatever country they're from, don't assume they are stupid. These are brilliant people from other countries with research and other things, yet they have an accent and you think, they're stupid. Think about you trying to do that in another country. For the Asian Americans, I'm always curious when I meet another Asian Americans where you're from. And the pearl I'll share is, instead of asking where are you really from, ask perhaps, what is your, may I ask what your ethnic background is? That's a very a benign way of asking, and I think most people are proud to talk about where they're from. Today, I've met people from multiple Asian countries, and it's always wonderful to see the diversity of where people are from. So I think those are the main ones that I wanted to really talk about. We all have implicit biases. Recognize them, do things in check, and think how this affect the other person, perhaps.
Doctors, I want to thank both of you for taking the time to be with us, for your leadership, for really paving the way for others. They have role models that maybe they never saw, that they can get to the places that you both have been, and where you continue to go, and how you're uniting both our amazing family medicine organizations, and how you're both members of each other's organizations. And I just see such a bright future for family medicine when we all stick together. So we want to thank you both. Doctor, both of you, let's give a big hand to Dr. Tochi Iroku-Malize and Dr. David Park.